Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Expert Zone podcast. My name is Ahmad Ben Jeroun, CEO and founder of AdLive, and today we're going to be talking about ad tech and more specifically about the transparency of the programmatic supply chain. Today, my guest is Dr. Augustine Fou, probably one of the best ad fraud consultant and programmatic experts on the market. Augustine has more than 20 years experience in helping companies build programmatic campaigns and increase their productivity of their ads. And that includes detecting and mitigating ad fraud and waste. Hi, Augustine.
Hello, Ahmad. Nice
Thanks
to be
for
on the
being
show.
here with us. Thank you.
Sure.
Thanks for being here. Cool. First of all, I hope you're well. I hope you're safe. How are you dealing with this situation on a personal level?
So far, so good.
Yeah. Okay.
Not too bad. I've been a small business owner for many years, so I'm very much used to working from home. So I think for some people who have been working in offices, this might be quite new, but I'm very familiar with working from home. So it's comfortable, not too big of a change.
Yeah, there's a remote culture that is being starting right now.
Yeah, I think more people will become comfortable with
Yes.
working from home, and especially in certain industries where it's more knowledge work than
Yeah,
physical work. They can actually do it whenever they have internet connection and computer.
exactly.
So
And especially in large, big cities where people spend a lot of time in their commute, and it's
oh
easier for.
yeah. Yeah, you save, if you're commuting into New York City from Connecticut or New Jersey, it could
Yeah,
be an hour each way. So
yeah,
a lot of that time either can be used for work or just relaxing, right? You're just saving a lot of time in transit.
exactly. Okay, so let's jump into it. Could you tell us a little bit about yourself in terms of background, education, and experience?
Sure. I've been in digital marketing for 20 some years. I left McKinsey in 96 here in New York City and kind of got into the digital advertising space back then. And back then, you can imagine we still had to convince clients they needed a website, right? So fast forward 20 plus years, now pretty much most of digital advertising is transacted via programmatic exchanges, and there's a lot of technology, at work now doing digital advertising. So I've kind of witnessed the entire arc of the evolution of digital advertising. And I'm, here in New York City for most of it, and also worked on both the client side in American Express, and also on the agency side at both Omnicom and IPG. But right now, I'm an independent consultant focused on the issue of ad fraud in digital programmatic.
Okay. And over this 20 years, what are the major changes you witnessed on the market in terms of market dynamics and structure?
I think overall, it's just the continued fragmentation. And what I mean by that is now there's millions upon millions of sites that are selling digital ads. So in the good old days, early in the internet, you could go to a few places, right? These are sizable either portals or publishers where you can say, I want to place ads on your portal. So the portal, for example, would be Yahoo, right? Where they aggregated sports scores, financial information, weather, news, all types of content. So pretty much everyone went to that same place, and you had a very sizable audience. But over the years, we saw continued specialization of content. So we saw the rise of blogs, and each of those would focus on a particular type of content, right? Maybe technology versus crafts or whatever. And when you have more and more of these blogs and blogging software, it allows more people to put content online. And then that led to the concept of long tail sites, right? So now these are thousands upon thousands, if not millions upon millions of really, really tiny sites. And they're tiny because the content is so niche that it appeals to only a small number of people, right? Like maybe baking sugar cookies or something.
Right.
But the problem is when you have all these tiny, tiny websites, the marketers are not going to go talk to 1,000 different websites to place their ads on those sites. So that gave rise to ad exchanges, kind of like Wall Street, where
Yeah.
buyers and sellers are matched together. And so now you buy from one exchange that can then place ads on thousands of small websites. But that's kind of what led to what we now call digital programmatic, where you can place your ads on millions upon millions of websites. But along with that, because there are so many websites now, most of which no one's ever seen or gone to, it's actually created the opportunity for more ad fraud than ever before. So those are kind of the macro trends, and why we're seeing more fraud now than ever before.
And especially now that video is playing a bigger role on programmatic, and it opens more room for fraud as well.
Yeah, on the video side, it's very consistent trend, which is the bad guys follow the money. So
Yeah.
when we move from display ads to then more of the ad budgets went into video ads, obviously the bad guys go there to steal money, right? And then when we go into mobile and mobile app, and then CTV and OTT, all of those are areas where there's a lot of money now, right? And so the bad guys go there to steal the budgets. And it's also because humans only have a finite number of waking hours during the day. And even if they use multiple devices at the same time, like they have their computer on, they have their TV on, and they're using 2 mobile devices at the same time, there's still only so many ad impressions that a human can possibly generate. So, when there's huge demand for things like video stream, ads on video streams, then the bad guys can use bots to just manufacture, video views to cause those ads to load and therefore make money.
Yeah.
So again, they can use, software programs to absorb all that demand.
Okay, I get it. Yeah. And it's funny what you're saying, because initially when I started AdLive, the protocol we were following was automated guaranteed. So the idea and the vision was to say, okay, there's 80% of the traffic or the inventory that is driving 20% of revenue to the publishers, which is programmatic back then. And while our focus was to say, okay, so let's increase the share of the inventory that is sold directly. And this is how we built the platform. But over time, we saw less and less appetite from buyers to execute automated guaranteed deals that were server to server, and shifted the budgets to programmatic.
Yeah.
And now they're doing programmatic direct, they're doing programmatic guaranteed, but still, we still need to have through the entire supply chain and the loopholes that we can find in it.
Yeah, I think the main reason is that they were convinced by their agencies, or they're kind of just looking for low CPM, and programmatic is definitely lower CPMs on average, and that's in my estimation. The reason it can be lower CPMs on average is because there's a lot of fraudulent sites or fake sites mixed in, where even if they sell it for 1 cent CPMs, they're still profitable because they don't have any cost of content, right? So in those cases, fake sites can sell their ad impressions much, much cheaper than real publishers, because the real publishers have very high cost of content, because they have real journalists, they have real editors, and so on and so forth, right? So,
Yeah.
A lot of the marketers, the buyers, were just attracted to low CPMs. But a key point that I think a lot of people miss, especially the buyers and their media agencies, is that they'll say, "Oh, I used to pay $30 to CPMs to direct publishers, but now I'm paying $3 CPM. So, even if there's fraud, I'm okay with it," because they say, "Oh, well, fraud is priced in. I'm getting lower
Yeah.
prices." But what they really don't understand is that they're buying 10 times more quantity, right? So even at a $3 CPM, if you buy 10 times more volume, you're still spending $30. But right now, you're buying crappy $3 inventory instead of buying $30 inventory from a legitimate publisher, right? So I think it kind of goes around and around, and it's circular logic. But they convince themselves that, oh, if I get lower CPMs, I've saved some money, but they didn't actually save any money. So.
Yeah, yeah. I saw one of the posts I think you shared yesterday or a couple of days ago with a list of websites that were included in one campaign under the same publisher ID. That was crazy.
Yeah, I think some of those cases, like there may be legitimate scenarios in which many different domains use the same publisher ID. So, for example, small websites that belong to one SSP, right, supply side platform.
Yeah.
But it also can be abused. So, just like any technology tool, it can be used for good and it can also be used for evil, right? So, in the other cases where the example was a content recommendation platform came to a site or a publisher and asked them to add 350,000 lines into their ads.txt. Right. So when you have that many lines, right, you're supposed to have, the 12 or the 20 lines in your ads.txt file that says which are the exchanges that are authorized to sell your inventory. When you have 350,000 more lines in your ads.txt file, right, it's easier for the fraud to hide. So it's actually made it easier for the bad guys and made it harder for the good guys to detect the fraud.
Yeah, definitely. So this is from a fraud perspective, but we had a conversation about the PwC ISBA report on the programmatic supply chain transparency in the UK. I think it was released earlier this month. What are your thoughts about it? Like in terms of supply chain structure, not just the fraud. Of course, fraud is an inherent part of it, but just in terms of market structure and terms of the segmentation you were mentioning.
Yeah, so that's more a matter of efficiency of the dollars, right? And how much of the dollar that the marketer spends is actually going towards showing ads, right? So typically, you have a supply chain. On the one side, you have marketers, the buyers, and then on the other side, you have the publishers, the sellers of the ad impressions. And then in the middle, you have the supply chain. And the more middlemen you have in that supply chain, right, in between the buyer and the seller, the more money is going to be extracted, right? Because each of those middlemen, whether it's an exchange or an ad tech company that sells data, everyone is trying to maximize their own profits, right? So they are extracting money out of the dollar that flows from the buyer to the seller. And so the ISBA reports show that on average, only half of the dollar, so 50 cents on the dollar, makes it through to the publisher for the purpose of showing ads. Now, that's not good or bad, right? Again, we're not talking about fraud or not. It's just that, the dollar is now partly going into the pockets of the middlemen. And of course, some middlemen add value, right? They do something specific and special and add value to the media buy. But there are also a lot of other middlemen that don't add any value and in fact are there strictly to arbitrage, right? So there's a lot of arbitrage opportunities where they see, an opportunity to buy low and sell high, right? And so some of those examples would be where they can actually buy traffic for say $1 and sell ads for $3 or $5 or $9 or whatever. They're there to just extract value as profits for themselves, right? In those cases, those middlemen are not adding value. In fact, they're extracting value. So long story short is kind of the moral of that story is more marketers should really think about shortening the supply chain or reducing the complexity in the supply chain. Because again, the longer or the more middlemen are in that supply chain, the less of your dollar actually goes towards what they call working media, right? The showing of the ad. And also when there's more complexity in that supply chain, it just creates many more loopholes for fraud to occur.
Yeah, but what caught my attention is that in their example, you had they analyzed just a standard supply chain from major advertisers and major publishers in the UK. And they found out that you have, as you said, 50% of the dollar spent that doesn't make it to the publisher revenue. But what caught my attention is that they were only able to match 12% of the studied impressions.
Yes. And what they said very specifically was that this was the best of the best, the most
Yeah,
premium of the premium, both
exactly.
buyers, sellers, and the exchanges. And like what other industry would you be confident in buying something where you could only get 12% of it verifiable, right? I
Yeah,
think there's no other industry in which that would be acceptable. But if you take that 12% number and consider this is the best of the best, you can imagine when
yeah,
we have a little bit less clean stuff or a
yeah,
little bit less scrupulous exchanges, it could be
yeah,
way worse than that,
yeah.
right? So,
And
mhm.
yeah, and if you dig talking about numbers, even on these 12% that are the best of the best, then there's still 15% of the total spend that is unexplained, and they call it the unknown delta.
Yeah, so some of that, there's been other studies. I don't know if you remember the Association of National Advertisers in 2016 did a transparency report. And what they were looking for were basically the kickbacks that agencies gave themselves in other countries, right? So they would basically be hiding the dollars and the discounts and stuff like that. So I think some of that 15% is going to be coming from those kind of things, right? There may be many different explanations for it, but again, what other industry is it acceptable to have 15% of your money go completely missing?
Yeah,
And keep in mind, that's 15% out of the 50% that went to the middleman, right? So that's a
yeah,
third of the dollars, right? So
yeah,
15% is the absolute number. It seems low, but it's actually a third of the dollars that went through Programmatic
yeah,
and the ad tech middlemen that just went missing and is not accounted for. And
yeah.
that's pretty, should be alarming, but probably not alarming enough.
Yeah, and and this gives place to a common thing on our market, which are discrepancies. And every time I speak to someone about our industry, what I'm doing, and how it works, they're just really surprised and can't understand how those discrepancies exist and how the entire industry can accept and keeps working and doing business this way. And
I,
if
I
you
I think not enough people look at the data, right? So imagine a big brand advertiser. They tend, like if they have $50 million to spend in digital or $100 million to spend in digital, they typically have a media buying agency and they give that money to the media buying agency to spend for them. Right. And so clearly the media agency is always going to tell the client everything's fine, so that they would keep spending. Right.
yeah,
So probably not enough people look closely. But you're right, there's discrepancies all over the place, right?
yeah,
And so in some of my work, not even the fraud part, but just think about the entire ad serving process. Right? So when a page loads, there you have a blank slot that will make a bid, or will call for an ad because it says who
yeah,
wants to bid on this slot and put an ad in it. So the bid request is made, and then a whole bunch of people bid on that, and then there might be one bid that wins, and then they make the ad call, and then the ad server, once it receives that call, will send out the ad, and then you have to wait until the ad arrives in the browser or in the device and fully renders. So that's like a 10-step process, any step of which could show extreme discrepancies. So just using a simple example, when I run experiments, we compare very simply the bids won versus the ad served, because we not only have access to the DSP interface where we buy the campaign, buy the ads through the campaign interface, but we also have an ad server. And 10% is it's almost like you should expect 10% discrepancies, right? It's all the time. So that means for every 100,000 bids you won, maybe only 90,000 ads actually get served, right? And that's not even saying how many ads actually arrived in the device and got rendered before the user moved away,
yeah,
right? So if you think about a mobile device, if you're just scrolling past news stories, right, it might make the ad call, but by the time the ad is served, you're already way past that slot. You're not looking at that, right? So there's many different points at which discrepancies can come in, but people are too trusting of the reports, right? So if you get an Excel spreadsheet that says you bought this many impressions and you got this many clicks, everyone thinks that that's the actual correct data, and no one asks whether it's actually correct or not. And that
And
therein lies the problem.
yeah, and when we try and ask, we did this with some of our publishers, and it's very difficult to get access to data. And this is also one of the key findings or conclusions of this study by the PwC, is that
Yes,
access to data was just crazy. It took them 9 months just to get access, full access
exactly.
to data.
Yeah,
Like you have two platforms like SSP and DSP, and you should be able to get access to log level data to enable the teams to go dig and try
yes.
to find their the meaning of it, but it never happens. And even at our level, we don't get it.
Yeah. I mean, before the problem was some of the contracts didn't allow the marketer to get access to the data, right? So that was kind of exposed in the 2016 transparency report. So
Yeah,
then over the years, more and more marketers added in the clauses into their contracts with their agencies and the ad tech providers so that they could get access to the data. But what the PwC study showed is that even with the right to get the data, right, they had it in their legal contracts. Even though they had the right to get it, it's a whole different matter to actually get it, right? So,
yeah,
they said the data format was all different, and just trying to get the data shipped to them from the different parties was the bulk of the work, and why the study took 18 months to complete.
yeah, yeah, I've seen that. And what we've seen is that on the report that on private marketplaces, let's say the revenue loss is smaller.
Yeah, I think it just corresponds to the number of middlemen, right? So, like we said before, the more supply chain, every one of them is trying to extract profits for themselves, right? So, once you can simplify the supply chain and shorten the supply path, that's going to be better for efficiency of your dollar.
Yep, we get it. And what would be your recommendations for advertisers? I think you work more with advertisers or publishers.
Actually, both of those endpoints, right? So the
Okay.
middlemen actually, they really don't want to hear what I have to say because they benefit from the volumes that are generated by fraud, right? So they'd rather look the other way and not do anything about it, because if they literally solve the fraud, they would cut their own revenues in half. So they don't want to do that. So I typically work with publishers on the one side and marketers on the other side. So for the publishers, the mainstream publishers, that I've studied over the years, they don't have a big bot problem. And for the very simple reason that these fraud bots are not going to waste their time going to mainstream publisher sites and causing pages to load. And that's because they don't get paid for that. These fraud bots will happily go to long tail websites that pay them for the traffic. And basically, those long tail websites are ones that may have some humans go there, right? But they just have, because the content is so niche, there's just not a lot of humans going there. So they have to buy the majority of their traffic. And so when they buy the traffic, the bots will go to those sites that pay them to cause the traffic, right? So for the mainstream publishers, they don't have a big bot problem. And I would encourage those publishers to actually sell less and less on programmatic exchanges, right? The more they can sell direct, the more of the dollar that they're getting from the buyer so that they can actually show ads, right? And then on the flip side, I would encourage the buyers, the marketers, to buy as much direct as possible. So even though the unit cost, the CPMs are going to be higher, they don't have to buy as much quantity because there's going to be much, much more humans in that audience, right? The big publishers have real content that real humans want to read, and so they're going to have much larger human audiences. So even if the buyer pays higher CPMs, they're getting more of their ads in front of humans than bots. So it's still going to be worth it for them to buy direct from the good publishers. And the more they buy direct, the less of their dollar is going to go into the pockets of the middlemen. Again, I'm not making a judgment call whether those middlemen are adding value or not. Some of them are, some of them aren't. It just boils back down to the practical reason, if the marketer can buy from the publisher direct, more of their dollar is going to go towards showing ads rather than the pockets of the middlemen, right? It's as simple as that. So I think it boils down to that simple recommendation. It's like buyers should sell more direct, and buyers should buy more direct, and sellers should sell more direct.
Yeah. So basically, your recommendation is to go back to market structure and dynamics that were in place 10, 15 years ago.
Yeah, because this kind of stuff that we're seeing right now,
Yeah.
it's a market that's completely out of whack, right? So if normal economic principles hold true, when there's more demand, prices should go up, right? And
Yeah.
constrained supply, right? So over the last 20 years, we've seen so many billions of dollars shift into digital from other channels like TV and print and other offline channels. But with this huge influx of dollars and demand, and finite supply, because again, human audiences don't grow, orders of magnitude year over year, right? They grow by single digit percentages, right? Goes up and down very, very slowly. But human audiences are finite, right? So when you have finite supply and this huge increase in demand, prices should have gone up. But
Yeah.
we've seen
Didn't.
CPM prices go down for the last 10 years.
Yeah.
And that tells me that supply basically went up even faster than the demand. And where did all that supply come from? Most of it's generated by bots, right? And so
What
that's why the current system is not functioning properly.
what about social media inventory? Didn't bring a lot of supply as well on the market, putting pressure on the
It's a
prices?
little bit different issue. So if you're talking about influencer fraud and like fake likes, fake views, and that kind of stuff, that's a little bit different issue. So, in Web 2.0, there's a lot of fake accounts created on Facebook because a lot of the big brands were paying for likes, right? It
Yeah.
costs maybe 50 cents to get an additional like on your Facebook page. So at the time, there were a lot of these fake accounts that were set up. But it's different than ad fraud because you don't need fake accounts. The way the ad fraud is happening is you're just using bots to load ad impressions or load web pages. So typically, if you think about Facebook, there's the ads that show on Facebook, and then there's something called FAN, Facebook Audience Network,
Yeah.
which are all these sites outside of Facebook that run ads using Facebook technology, right?
Yeah.
So most of the fraud is going to be in FAN, because those are outside websites that can increase their own revenue by using bots, right? And so if you show your ads on those FAN sites, you're going to get exposed to a ton of fraud. But if you show your ads on Facebook itself, you're going to get exposed to less of this kind of ad fraud, which again is different than influencer fraud. Right. So in
Yeah.
those cases, it's basically those Instagram influencer that bought a lot of followers that were not actual people. Right. So even
Of
if they have
course.
1 million followers, it's not people that like them. So it's just a little bit different. There's influencer fraud, and it's different from ad fraud.
Yeah. The ad fraud I was referring to, or not just the part of social media on it, was that it created a huge inventory for ad spend over the last 10 years. So
Yes.
maybe that would capture some of the demand that was added on the market.
Yeah, I
And
think
that would
so. I
pressure
mean, yeah, a lot of those dollars did go into showing ads on social
Facebook and
networks.
Instagram.
Yes.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. Excellent. Thanks a lot, Augustine, for your great
Yeah.
talk. And if you have any other word for our audience, please go ahead.
Oh yeah, if people are interested in this topic, they can find me on LinkedIn. So my
Yeah.
first name dot last name, Augustine Fou. Find me on LinkedIn, and then my Twitter handle is ACFOU. If
And
they're interested.
and I've been following you for years.
All right, sounds great.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ahmad.
Perfect. Thanks a lot,
Okay.
Augustine. Stay
All
safe.
right. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.